Gentlemen, if you want to take your seats, we're going to crack back on. We're running a little bit late, so it'd be good to try and claw back some time without turning the event into an E2E VC dynamic agenda. So next up, flying in for the day, just for the day.
Just for the day.
Is Esther, who's going to talk to us about infrastructure as code, something that's very keen to my own heart at the moment. Yeah. All my builds seem to be being done as code, so like a boss.
Thank you. Well, I'm very excited about infrastructure as code, so I hope after this session some of that excitement rubs off on you and you are eager to get started as well. I only have 30 minutes, so I am going to skip some deep dive moments that I normally have, but I'll make sure to give you some references to where to find the good stuff. First of all, I don't know how many of you do not yet know me. My name is Esther Barthel. Thank you, sir, with the Jesus looks. I've been in IT for quite a long time, mostly focused on end-user computing, but the last couple of years it shifted to more DevOps and infrastructure as code projects. Some of you may already know me from some of the community work that I'm doing, involved in the CTP program, MVP program, and also one of the founding leaders of the Citrix user group community Women in Tech mentorship program, where I'm trying to reach out to more women in tech and provide one-on-one sessions for mentoring, but also offering the network that I know to help them be more visible and to be more active in our community. And as I mentioned, DevOps, cloud automation, that's more the focus of my work these last couple of years. So what I want to talk to you about today is, first of all, DevOps is like this huge terminology that still doesn't give you basically a lot of clues of what the actual work is or what the actual function or role is that we're supposed to do. So hopefully I can give you a little bit of insights on that, or at least share with you the struggles that I had to try to understand it. And I also want to focus on infrastructure as code. And I picked two specific deep diver topics, Bicep and GO-EUC, and I'll get to that in a couple of minutes. So for me, when I got started, the terminology was already there, DevOps. Become a DevOps engineer. And, well, I don't know about you all, but for me, even looking at the definition where it says it's a combination of development and operations, that still doesn't give you any clue of what kind of work to expect, or if it's more focused on development or more focused on operations. So my first question was, okay, if we're talking about DevOps, where do I need to position that terminology or the kind of work? Is it more linked to the operations side of things? Didn't realize quickly that that wasn't really the case. If you're looking at DevOps and especially the methodologies and the tool sets that we're using, it's obvious that it's more focused on the development side of things. And I'll explain that in a bit better. First of all, I was confronted with, well, I don't know if you all know Aaron Parker. He's one of my MVP community friends. And he posted this tweet a while ago, and I think it really expresses, I'm not going to say fears, but some of the reservations that we're having against this whole DevOps terminology. Is it a kind of scheme, world domination, to get all operators in becoming developers? I don't think that is the case. So I'm hoping that I can demystify that. But before I had a chance to respond, I think Tobias basically put it out very clearly. it's not totally new that we like to automate things. I do believe that right now we do have much better tools at our hands to start automating deployments, configurations of our infrastructures. And then I saw this one, which was, okay, yes, we do have better tools apparently, but yeah, too many. Or at least this is so overwhelming, you still have no idea where to get started, which doesn't normally get me very excited about learning new tricks or new functions. So I figured it would be good to first start and zooming in on infrastructure as code, because that's, especially if we're looking at EUC, where we are building infrastructures and managing infrastructures, I figured that would be the best place to get started. So if we're looking at infrastructure as code and the definition, it's all about that process of provisioning infrastructure resources. And that could either be to a private cloud or a public cloud, your local data center, or somebody else's computer. And the key part of infrastructure as code is that it uses specific templates and scripts together with what we call an orchestrator to publish those resources or to deploy those resources in your infrastructures. I hope that still makes sense to everyone. See some nodding? Okay, cool. So I've mentioned code quite a lot, but I did realize very quickly when I got started is that you also need to be aware that if we're talking about code, there are two different types of code that you need to understand. And that's imperative and declarative code. So I tried to find a way to easily explain the differences between the two types of code. If we're looking at imperative code, it's all about providing basically step-by-step instructions or performing step-by-step tasks, sequential, but very clear descriptions of all the actions that we have to perform. And if you think about, well, one of my other hobbies is barbecuing. So I figured, if I think about barbecuing and I think about burgers, what is the best way to explain imperative code? Well, to me, it feels like following a recipe or like a manual that tells you each and every step that you need to perform and also the order in which to perform the steps to make sure you have that perfectly cooked burger that you can enjoy. Makes sense, right? Translating that to the world of IT, it's basically all about using scripts. And that can be PowerShell scripts, as I'm showing in this example, but that could also be bash scripts or whatever kind of scripting that we're talking about. And I'm using the word script specifically because I want to stay away from telling you all that you're going to become programmers, because to me there is a huge difference between scripting, which is to get like simple tasks or administrative tasks performed, and programming, which is all focused on software development. And that's definitely not the area I want to go to if we're talking about DevOps. And as I mentioned, there's also declarative code. And if you're looking at what declarative code is, it's all about focusing on the end configuration or the end result that you want to have in your infrastructure deployment. And I liked to compare that using that barbecue or that hamburger example previously. I figured this is just the easy way. Going to a restaurant and ordering your favorite burger from a menu. And it doesn't mean that there's only one flavor or one option available. You still get to basically specify if you want to have that tomato on it or not. If you want to go the healthy way and add the lettuce or not. If you want to go extra bacon or Want to go extra bacon? Yes, that's what I figured. That's why this session is before lunch. Please do not all run off to get your burgers. Stick with me just a little bit longer. But if we translate this back to IT, so hopefully I still have your focus, then we're talking about using templates. Because these templates specify the end configuration that you want to have, either in Azure, Amazon, or your own private cloud environment. And this is just an example of a Bicep template, because I knew Freek was going to be in the room. And normally we would do the presentation together, but yeah, maybe next time. So let's talk about templates to get started with infrastructure as code. As I mentioned, my preference, if we're talking about Azure only, is to use Azure Resource Manager templates, ARM templates, or Bicep, that is now available to make it even easier and more intuitive to create those ARM templates. And I think I've mentioned it now like 5 times, so that's 5 stickers, I think, Freek? Okay, going good. So the cool part about Bicep is, as I mentioned, is that Microsoft realized that it's not so intuitive and easy to create your own custom ARM templates. So to make that easier and to make sure that we are more adaptive to creating those ARM templates and implementing infrastructure as code in a declarative way, is to introduce an extra language that helps you create those ARM templates or create those automated deployments of your resources. And starting with Bicep is really easy. There's an executable, basically the orchestrator in our story. There's the usage, which is basically optional, but I would really recommend it, of Visual Studio Code. And then you also have to have a mechanism to really present that template to Azure in this case, or the Azure Resource Manager, that's the heart of Azure deployments. And you can use either PowerShell or the Azure CLI for that. And then it's as simple as creating your first Bicep template, and then using, as I said, either PowerShell or the Azure CLI to deploy those resources in Azure. And if we're looking at AVD, for instance, that allows you to basically use Bicep or ARM templates to create templates for each and every part of AVD that you need to configure, which to me sounds like making life a lot easier than having to use the GUI or the portal to get everything together. But that's just me. And I have to admit that I quickly realized that there's a lot of help that you can get in creating your Bicep templates. First one is that there's a specific Bicep extension for VS Code, which helps you all along the way. It does auto-completion. It gives you additional information on all the attributes that you can configure within your template, but it also does a lot of auto-correction for you. Or you just make sure that you get Freek on speed dial. Or do like full cool sessions on Bicep, really deep diving, and basically letting him go crazy with all the demos. Yes, this session is actually in English, so that's one of the reasons why I included it. And I think it's one of the latest that we did in January of this year. And it's a very interactive session, so that's one of the reasons why I wanted to mention it. Because I do realize I don't have time to do all the deep diving, to introduce Freek as my co-host and have him do all these cool demos. But they are recorded, and this session will definitely talk you through each and every step of creating your first Bicep template. And if that is not enough, and you want to have a more personal link with Freek, of course there's also his book. So I know you don't promote it a lot during our sessions, so I figured I'd just give you some extra credits for that. And it's not really expensive, so feel free to order it, and feel free to make sure that you have my contact information, because I might be able to redirect you on speed dial, or not. Maybe just LinkedIn. Well, like I said, I only have 30 minutes, so I wanted to make sure that I give you as much information to get you started. But I do also realize that not everyone has the luxury to have an Azure-only environment. So I wanted to give a shout out to this other cool initiative. I don't know how many of you already know GO-EUC. Okay, that's a couple of people. Some might even recognize some of the members of GO-EUC. There's not a lot of Jesus figures out there in IT world, Elcho. So the cool part about GO-EUC is that they have this very clear mission. And I'm not very good at exactly repeating that mission, but I do realize that the intent is to make sure that performance testing, EUC environment testing, user experience testing is becoming more and more available to everyone in EUC. That's one of their main missions. And if you feel like you have something to add, please feel free to join us, because we always love to learn more from the community and work on, even if it's just a suggestion for one of the other tests. But one of the things that we realized with GO-EUC is that in order to do those tests, you need to be able to quickly spin up an infrastructure, a Citrix infrastructure or VMware infrastructure, and maybe even an Azure AVD infrastructure. Though that was more on the expensive side, I think. So if you want to sponsor, feel free to do that too. But if you want to be able to quickly spin up the environments, you need a repeatable solution for that. Because we quickly realized that we couldn't have Ryan on speed dial each and every day to ask him to fix the lab again. So yeah, I know this is one of his pet projects as well, to give him an opportunity to also do some consulting work. Like I said, our main goal is to make sure that we share all our testing results and the user experience that we discover along the way, or performances of, well, very hot topics like Microsoft Teams in virtual environments. And in order to do that, we had to come up with the GO-EUC Framework, which basically is a public repository on GitHub that has all our template-based and all our scripts that we're currently using to deploy our own lab environment. So it has Citrix-specific scripts. It has the infrastructure-specific scripts. And one of the things that you see in our technology stack is that we did try to find those industry standards, tools that are usable in multiple platform environments. So unfortunately with Bicep, which I of course love, which is Azure specific, we quickly realized that if we're using Terraform, for instance, which gives us the same capabilities to use a template to deploy our infrastructure, but it's more flexible. It has a provider for Azure, but it also has a provider for AWS, or even a provider for a VMware vSphere. So that also allows you, or us in this case, to deploy that same, or use those same templates to also deploy our infrastructures on our NUCs, our own home labs. And I think this makes it very powerful. So that's one of the reasons why I wanted to share that with you. Because I know we sometimes forget to promote the cool stuff that we find that make our works easier. So if we're looking at the GO-EUC framework, it's based on a lot of what we call our DevOps principles. Basically, those are like your architecture or your design principles. And as you can see, we made sure that we had like 4 basic principles that we stick to. And the one that I love most is the last one, which says, think big. Like I want to use all those tools that I presented previously on the slide. But start small. Make sure that you focus on one of the tools first before you start like spreeing all kinds of different templates and lose track of all the changes that you're making in your environment. So if we're talking about, once again, our framework, we also started small, focusing on infrastructure as code, using Terraform, and yes, we did use Bicep. One more sticker. But we also extended that after we had a nice first set of templates that build our basic infrastructure. We quickly realized, especially if we're talking about EUC, you need hosts as well. And you need identical hosts. So it would be very beneficial, and that's one of the things that we took on next, to focus on image as code. Because there are some great tools out there. Once again, in this case, we're using Packer, because that allows us to create an image both for Windows, for Linux, on VMware, once again on Azure. So it has that full spectrum of all the different platforms that you might encounter or you want to test out. And then there was another piece that we were able to add once we had our basic images in place. And that is, there's always this additional question of how are we going to make sure that it is configured in the way we want it to be configured. Especially if you're running a lot of tests. You want to make sure that each and every test is run on the exact same configuration. So you know that the results can be compared. So that's one of the reasons why we also introduced the desired state configuration, which is for that environment configuration, operating system configuration, and software installation and configuration part. And in our case, we're focused on Ansible, because that allowed us to quickly create playbooks, but also PowerShell. Yes. Though Ryan keeps reminding me that that's like a last resort.
Actually, PowerShell is also used by Amazon.
See?
Still using PowerShell.
Yeah, this is just him telling me to keep on contributing to the project. There is PowerShell in there. It's hidden, Esther. Just keep going.
I'm still disappointed that there's no Python in there, but it's just me.
To be honest, there's Python.
Yeah, I was going to say. You need to keep up to date with the latest releases, Eljo. So basically, with these 3 focus areas in place, and understanding the tools that we're going to use and going to create in our templates and scripting, well, not just for us the journey was on, but basically I want to challenge each and every one of you that if you feel like this is something that you would love to learn more about, feel free to join us, feel free to check out the repository and start your own journey. And if I'm looking at some of the lessons that we learned during our journey, one of the things is it's not just about the tools because, well, as we said at the beginning, think big, start small. So don't be afraid to select one tool and maybe discover along the way that it's not fully meeting your expectations or your functional requirements. There will be another tool available that will get you where you want to go, get you to that dot on the horizon. But the other thing, as you hear me say a couple of times, is those design principles or those project principles that we had. That helped us to basically make sure that we stayed focused on our journey and the path that we were on. I'm having trouble reading the icons. Sorry about that. And that's basically the most important message. Fail fast. And what we mean by that is do not be afraid that it doesn't work the first time that you're trying something. Make sure that you have a safe environment, so don't go and start testing in production. Because that might not feel like a safe environment to fail. Because one of the things that we discovered is the greatest lessons in understanding the tooling and understanding the templates and the impact on your infrastructure is by those failing moments. They teach you more than just copying and pasting some code. But you didn't hear that from me. As I mentioned at the beginning, I just love Visual Studio Code because it has all those extensions. Not just for Bicep, but also for Terraform, also for Packer, also for Ansible. So that helps you so much in quickly understanding the scripting language and the scripting rules within the language. And especially now, I guess, with all the AI that is getting more and more involved, it will only get better in helping you quickly go to that result that you're striving for. The other thing is learn, of course. We also had some Pluralsight videos that we watched or trainings that we watched that helped us understand some of the basic mechanisms on how to do versioning, how to do source control, how to work with Git, for instance, which sometimes I still have no clue what I'm doing, but as long as they approve my pull request, then I'm all good. That's the one thing that I did learn. As I mentioned, source control. I think that's one of the biggest things, especially in our case, when it's all about collaborating. Multiple people building the code, building the templates. You need to have some source control in place to make sure that you're not in each other's ways, but still have that creative freedom to work on your own sections and bring it back to the collective, so to speak. Thank you. And last, it was a thank you, I only have 5 minutes left. No worries. I kind of anticipated that. So I hope this gives you, well, at least some of, it shows my excitement about infrastructure as code, because I see it as leveling up in not just managing the infrastructures, but being able to get more creative with it in less time, and to finally find a way to get all those repeatable tasks into either a template, which will make life a lot easier, or some scripting, or get some other enthusiasts to script them for you. So feel free to reach out to any of us from GO-EUC to get all the cool stuff from our framework. And let us know how much fun it is to use it. And if you have any tips, tricks to make it better, then please share. And now, thank you.
Thank you, Esther. That was great.
Awesome.
I'm really sorry we couldn't give you more time. We've got a packed agenda for today.
It's okay.
Thank you for coming all this way to deliver that. I'm guessing you're not going to be around for the round table if you're shooting off there, or are you maybe? What time are you leaving?